Hey everybody, I'm John Reffett and welcome back to the shop. Today I thought I'd do a video on kind of rebuilding one or refurbishing a rod that you've already got. What we'll be doing, this is a Lew's blank. It's an American Hero blank, nothing special here, but two-piece rod for a customer. He wanted for his daughter to match this teal colored reel. So I guess the whole point of this is just to show you don't have to run out and order from somewhere the whole rod blank, guide, whole 9 yards. Now you can do that if you choose, but you can take your existing rod that you have and we'll strip all the guides off of it, and we'll rewrap them in the teal color. We'll do some marbling work here and probably paint all the way up at least to the first guide. But we'll take all the Lew's blanks off and all the American Hero and all that stuff. We got some custom decals to put back on it. So we'll get right into it, and I'll show you what we're doing and how to remove these guides and all this other stuff. So get the camera moved around. Meet you right back. Okay, so like I said, we're going to try to make this match this reel. So we're going to use this teal thread along with, and we'll throw some silver in there for some accents. Marbling be the same colors. So what you want to do is, like, if you can see right here, there was some epoxy here once before, and it was just some black thread just to cover up this white coating that was on the rod. You just take your X-Acto knife, and I'll do a guide here, but this is all the same way, and just scrape that off, but be real careful not to gouge your blank, because if you do that, trust me, it will break, because I did one at the handle some time ago, and it snapped right here. So same thing here. There was a little bit of epoxy with some black thread here. Now this coating, as you can see, it did come off just a little bit, but no problem. We're going to sand all this and paint an epoxy over top of it, so you'll never see that. For some reason that winding check wasn't glued, but we'll take care of that. Same way down on the butt end of the rod, there was some wrapping here, where I took that off. And if it happens to be a two-piece, go ahead and mark, line your guides up, and go ahead and put a piece of tape and then mark that. Keeps your spine together on the two-piece, because there's a spine in each one of them. So we'll take this apart. Now what you want to do on these guides is right along the top of the guide, that's where the guide foot is. So you can go ahead and scrape. You can see this comes off pretty easy. A newer rod's going to come off a lot easier than one that's been around a while, because it still seems to be a little bit pliable. But you can take that and scrape it all the way down to the guide foot without worrying about touching the blank. Now once you get, see that there, once you get to the guide foot, it'll just pop right out. Kind of just give it a little twist, comes right off. Now once you've got that, zoom in just a little bit, once you've got that there, you'll see where the guide foot was. You kind of just take your fingernail, and that stuff, you can see it just comes right off. So now if you're lucky enough to get a piece of thread to come out, a lot of times you can, if I can get this right, just unwind that thread, and it'll just take the epoxy right with it. And it just continues to come right off. But up here, where you have this little bit left here, just gently scrape around. You don't have to get every bit of it off, but if your fingernail will hang on whatever, like you can kind of see that right there. If your fingernail will hang on that, most likely your thread will. So just scrape ever so easily. A lot of times you can get your fingernail under there and just pop it right up. That one's kind of stubborn. Just, you do not want to gouge that blank. A little scratch, you'll be okay, but as you can see, it just kind of flakes right off. And you can also, once you get all this off, take a little piece of sandpaper and just gently sand over this to smooth it out some. But it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. So we'll try to get this rest of this off of here. Once you get your blade under it, it'll come right off. Doesn't take a lot of force. And sometimes these rods, they coat them with whatever, kind of like the white you saw down there with that section out of it. Sometimes the black will come with it, but you know, from about here to here, you're going to wrap anyway, so it doesn't matter. So that's about how easy it is to take the guide off. So now up here, even in the where the two pieces went together, they had some thread as well here. But we'll go ahead and get everything else stripped off of this thing, and then we'll come back and we'll go from there. Okay, so we've got everything off except for the tip top. So you can see I've scraped this down. So what you want to do now is just get a lighter. You know, these come off the same way they go on. Just heat that up. Now don't get too carried away because you can melt the tip into that. Been there, done that. So take my word for it on that one. But I recommend getting a glove because that sucker will get a little warm. And just heat it up. Sometimes they get a little stubborn, but it a lot of times doesn't take a whole lot. Kind of doing this, you'll see what some of these rod manufacturers put into them. Some of them do really well, and some of them don't do very well at all. Man, they must have really glued that one good. But if you do happen to break off that last little bit, you know, that last inch or so, it's not a complete deal breaker here. Wow, that sucker is really on there. Lew's seems to do pretty well. I've done several Lew's rods. They do fairly well with their epoxy and glue. Well, they've done really well with that one. I can't get that sucker off of there. Could be still some epoxy around the very end of that guide. So you can go back in and scrape a little bit more. Because sometimes that epoxy, it'll suck back up into the end of that. Try that. Heat this thing up again, see what happens. These are stainless steel inserts in these things, so I don't have to worry about ruining the guide. Wow. That thing is really on there. I think we're going to end up taking off the end of the blank. Yep. So we'll see if we can get it off, but I believe that's going to break on us. Yep. And we'll just keep going until we get it. Sooner or later it'll cut loose. There we go. She came off. As you can see, like I say, that sucker was stubborn. They must have really put a bunch of glue down in there. So, let's see if I can get where you can handle it a little bit. I'll take a thread pick or anything that you can get down in there and just kind of scrape around inside. Get some of that excess glue off of there. So now that you've got that off, we didn't hurt that any. Just scrape that little bit of glue off of there. And any thread or anything that might be in there yet. And I always take a little piece of sandpaper and go ahead and smooth that up, but that's pretty much got that. One other thing, when you take your guides off, sometimes you're going to end up with some epoxy stuck, as you can see it right there. So you can just take your knife or your fingernail and just peel that off, because you don't want that there when you go to re-epoxy and rewrap your guides. It's going to get in your way. Pretty much just pops right off. But be sure to clean your guide feet up, and you may even touch them with the file, so you know as the thread comes up, it'll just jump right up on top of it. So check each one of your guides. So I guess the next thing we got to do is start sanding on our the white part of it and the decals and everything, and then we'll go from there. See you back in a bit. Okay, so we've got everything stripped off, all of our guides, everything ready for paint. As you can see, we've sanded it. We've got all the decals off. There was one here, here, and also a rod spec. Some of them are printed. Some of them are stick-on decals. These were stick-on. Now, as you sand, some of that glue or some of the plastic off of it can start to ball up. So you can take your X-Acto knife and just lightly scrape all that stuff off and then sand again, and it'll smooth right out for you. So, and then be sure to paint or tape off everything that you don't want tape on or paint on, obviously. Just some masking tape or some of this painter's tape you can get about anywhere. And then tape everything off real good. What we'll do, we'll paint from about the middle of the first guide down to the top of the foregrip, and then paint here as well. We'll have marbling over top of up to about here, and this will just be paint. I wouldn't recommend going any farther than the first guide, because you know as that flexes, you know you get further up into the rod, it's going to flex more. It could crack. Now they do make some places that you can order. I think it's called Rod Geeks. You can check them out if you want a certain colored blank, you know, teal or seafoam or blue or whatever your color might be, and it's an automotive kind of paint, and it will not crack. But as far as this, you know, we're just going to use regular Rust-Oleum, nothing special, in the teal color to match our thread and the reel. So, and I'm sure there's other paints that work as well. But you know, once you paint that, then you can just epoxy over top of it. It's protected. So we'll get a couple coats of paint on. I'd recommend at least 3. You know, depending on if you have any imperfections in here, you might have to go another coat or 2. But usually about 3 light coats is plenty good enough. So we'll get us a couple coats on this thing. We'll come right back. Okay, so we got a little bit of paint started. As you can tell, it does tend to cover up really well. You can still see some of those little imperfections that came out when we were sanding. One thing I did forget to mention earlier, about a 320 grit or even lighter. This is just some wet dry sandpaper that I had. Just don't get anything really, really rough or you'll leave some heavy scratches. So this is the start of it. I'd say another coat or 2 probably would do it. So we'll get that on, let it dry. Okay, so we've got about 3 coats of paint on our rod here that we're redoing. Turned out pretty well. So what we'll do from here to about here, we'll marble, and then of course we'll put our first guide here, and our wrap will cover over that little bit of paint right there. Now sometimes you're going to have to sand maybe just a little bit because you'll get a lip right where your tape was. So you can sand that down, your thread will just jump right over top of it. And then we'll do some marbling back here. But another thing I wanted to show you, if you have a rod that you've had for a while and you just want a new handle, new guides, you know, whatever color you might want, you can remove these handles. Now it's a little bit of a job. This is just an Abu Garcia Vandana rod we've had for a while. They're the reel seats. These guys really glued them on pretty good, and they'll have winding checks probably on either end. I think I have another one here, kind of show you. These can get these little winding checks here. They're aluminum here, and then of course this aluminum end. I took a hacksaw blade, just had it in my hand, and just put a groove in it, and you can take a screwdriver and kind of just twist it, and it'll pop loose, and that'll allow you to break that glue. Now here's where you're going to have some issues on this type here. Of course, this is a split grip, but this right here is really tough. Be very, very careful. You can use the hacksaw blade and cut you a groove in there, maybe on both sides, and then try to ever so gently split it and then bust it loose that way. As far as the EVA foam, you can just take a pair of pliers and just nip at it, and you can peel it loose. And then of course you can see everything down here. You'll have to sand all the excess glue and foam handle and all that stuff off. But you can remove that handle, and then order whatever handle you like. I'm gonna put a palm swell, since this is a spinning rod, along with a wind grip in the red and the black, and we'll wrap everything up in red and black. So I guess next step we'll put some marbling on our rod here. Oh, and one other, this is one that is pretty much finished. It was, I can't even remember what kind of blanket it was, but same customer as the teal colored one. But up here we've marbled, sanded, did the same thing, put a little purple paint, purple and teal, and the custom decals, custom built for, and then also the rod spec. But yeah, you can take any of these you want to and redo your rods and fix them the way you want them to be. Or if you just damage the handle or guides or whatever, it's pretty much the same deal. So we'll get some marbling on this, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we did our marbling. You can see it here. It's a little teal, a little silver in there. And wrapped one of the guides. We'll do teal and silver. That's just first coat. So, most likely you'll need about 2 coats on them to fix any, maybe there's a bubble or something that didn't possibly pop out. But we'll wrap the rest of the guides. Then of course we'll have to put our decals on and all that stuff and make a few wraps here and there. But it's coming right along. And also, on the other one I talked to you about replacing the handle. So we did get our handle on, put a red wind grip handle and the palm swell grip here for the reel seat. Do some other wrapping and cover up all these decals, but at least up to the first guide. So I'll include some of this one in as well. And so as you can see, you can take your whole your existing rod, strip that sucker completely down, and make it like you want. And also, remember talked about the spine in the rods. This one was completely backwards. So that's one thing that you can correct. A lot of these store-bought rods, they do not take the time to find the spine. It just takes a minute. So you can get all that right, plus have it how you want it. So we'll get some more done, and then we'll come right back. Okay, so we've got our rod pretty much wrapped up, just about almost finished. Got the first coat of epoxy on. Looks like I'm probably going to have to do one more, but kind of see what we did. Got the custom built for decal here. And then, of course, we marbled up to here. And this is paint with epoxy over top of it. And kind of down the rest of the rod there. Put the rod specs decal here on the split grip part. But you can see how easy it is to take what's your existing rod and collar it the way you want it. Replace the guides or the handle like we did on this one. Like I said, this was a Abu Garcia Veritas blank. We'll do some more wrapping here. Probably put a spiral fade wrap down through here and then epoxy everything. But a few more examples of some I've done for myself. This was a Cabela's Tournament ZX rod, medium heavy. I did not take the decals. You see it still says the Tournament ZX and their stuff on it, but I just a different reel and then added some different color wrapping to this one. Same here. Didn't do a whole lot special to this one, other than most of the wrappings were black, and I added the chartreuse to match the handle and different reel. Same on this one. Another loose blank. Like the handle. Did a little marbling here, spiral fade up here, and took all their decals off. So, you know, then got a custom decal of my own for here. But just a few examples of what you can do with, you know, store-bought rods if you choose to go that way. Like I say, you can order the whole kit from Mud Hole or some other rod supplier and do what you want. And there's, you know, 100 different colors. You can make it however you want it. So if you have any questions or anything I didn't cover or you didn't like, you know, let me know. One other thing, when you take your guides off, sometimes you'll get, you know, there might be a little bump in your thread. Don't worry about it as long as it's not causing gaps in your thread. But as you epoxy over that, it will level everything out and you'll never see it, because there was one here and now you can't even see it at all. So your epoxy will do a lot to cover a few little mistakes here and there. But just watch for, as you epoxy over this, sometimes you get those little fish eyes in them. You can take some sandpaper and lightly go over it, rough it up just a little bit, and another coat of epoxy. I like to take the epoxy and let it sit for a little while, let it get a little bit thicker. It tends to cover a little more. So that's a way you can fix that little bit of stuff. But I hope it helped you. And if you got any comments, hit the like and subscribe button. Let me know. You guys stay safe and have a good one.